I'll start off with this question here in Piazza, which is, do we have to purchase the iClicker Reef? No, if you follow the directions I'm not sure where all that stuff is, pre-course setup maybe. Site registrations. This doesn't look. Where am I? Yeah, right here. iClicker setup. Let me click on that. If you follow this Google Doc on the iClicker setup, it'll go through the process of you using iClicker without paying anything. The bill's being footed by the university. You shouldn't have to pay a penny for the iClicker stuff. Okay, so just make sure you follow the directions in this Google Doc that's linked here. So that answers that question. Any other questions? You don't have to type it in here. Anyone want to shout out a question before we get going? Nothing? No one's curious about my stock picks to make it rich in 2019? All right. I offered. Okay. Given that I'm still teaching here, my previous stock picks weren't that good. All right. So we will want to go to what's due when. Let's remind ourselves what we're doing and where we're going. You should have, before week 3, that means before today, you should have watched this video bits here. We are doing an in-class activity today. However, having seen this video is not necessary to doing the activity in class today. However, you do need to have watched this video in order to successfully do the lab. Okay? And just to repeat, the video bit stuff contains content that I won't be lecturing on in class. Now, I certainly will take questions on it. In fact, I'd encourage questions on it. But if you're expecting me to give you a song and dance about Boolean expressions and if statements, you're not going to get it. All right? I'll just follow up with the questions you have. So don't forget about that stuff. There's also, due at the end of this week, and today, Friday, is Project 1. Now, I haven't talked a lot about Project 1. It's pretty straightforward. Certainly, by the time you look at this video bits and maybe do Monday's lab, Monday/Tuesday's lab, you should have that project well in hand. I'd say it's charitably calling it a project. It's really much closer to one of those labs that you're doing. There really isn't a lot to it. There is some extra credit. It gets a little bit more interesting if you go for the extra credit. But if you're just going to do the base project, it shouldn't be a big deal. They do become much more of a big deal as we move forward, but this first one is pretty small. The project is something that you're expected to code on your own. You can certainly be hanging out with your teammates or associates and talking about the project, answering questions for each other, but wholesale copying of the project is not allowed, nor is chunk-wise copying of the project. What else do we have? We have the two, where am I, week 3, we have the 2 labs, labs 4 and 5. We have another activity on Friday. I think on Wednesday I'll be lecturing a little bit. So, looks like there aren't any questions. Let's go ahead and talk about the in-class activity, which is assignment 5. I have to make that small. All right. So this is another one of those where you're certainly welcome to work collaboratively with other folks in the class, but you are each individually required to submit it. And I believe when's the deadline for this? I believe it might be Friday. Yeah. So you've got a few days to finish it up, but you want to get a good start on it now. You definitely don't want to leave this towards the end. The motivation for the assignment was that I would typically get around week 3, 4, 5 and walking around lab helping folks. There'd be a good portion of the class. There'd be a few of you that would have this wonderfully organized file hierarchy. You've got a csci111 directory, and if I go in there, you've got an assignments directory and a labs directory and a projects directory, and if I go into your labs directory, you have a lab01 directory, lab02 directory. You get the idea, nice and organized. But there's a good chunk of you I would go and sit down to help you with whatever problem you're having, and you would have, it would just look like you took a file cabinet and threw all the papers in there. You just had everything just littered all over the place. You had directories named ls, you had directories named cd, directories named lab3.cpp, files named makedir, and so then I'd sit there for several minutes and help you get organized. And so I thought that this is a good activity to help you practice organizing things in Linux. So hopefully it'll translate to you organizing your own work. There is a file that you want to download. If you're on a Mac, you just download it on your Mac and work on it. If you're on a PC, then what you would do is you would download it to your PC, and then you would use MOBA Xterm to drag and drop this file to copy it over to Jaguar, and you do the work on Jaguar. Okay. Let me go ahead and click it. It should, with any luck there, I've downloaded it. And let's go through this. All right, so there's a bunch of stuff that's misnamed and disorganized. The final product should be, there should actually be an AO5 directory, which is created for you. We'll look at that in just a moment. Inside of the assignment 5 directory, AO5 is a labs directory, and then inside of labs is lab01, lab02, lab03, lab04. I think it goes up to lab 9 or lab 10. And then inside of each one of those should be a simple CPP file, programming source file. So that's how it should look nicely organized once you're done with this activity. All right. This assignment's best done with 2 or 3 terminal windows. Probably 2 is enough. I'll show you what I mean about that in just a moment. So I said get the tarball into your account either on Jaguar or on your Mac somewhere, and then you want to do this command. I'm going to do it all here. I'm going to move, again, that tilde represents my home directory. In my home directory, I've got a downloads directory, and in my downloads, I should have assignment5.tar that I just downloaded. I want to move it from that location to my current directory. And if I do an ls, there it is. What this file is, the TAR is an abbreviation standing for tape archive. So this is actually a really, really old format that what it does is it can take many files and many directories in a large hierarchy, and it can bundle them all into a single file. And this utility originally came about because you would bundle entire file hierarchies into a single file, and then you would stream that onto tape. And then when you accidentally delete a file and you need a backup, you need to get it off tape, you go ahead and put the tape back on, and you would run the complementary command of this tape archive to extract that single big file once again into all the files and directories. Okay? And there are ways of getting single files out of there and so forth. If you're familiar with zip in the PC world, that actually does 2 things. Zip will take the entire hierarchy, bundle it together, then it does some compression. So that's exactly what tape archive does without the compression. There's no compression done with tar. This command, so the command is called tar, tape archive. The X means extract. Like all Unix and Linux commands, they tend to work silently. V means be verbose and let us know what you're doing. So I would be content with just the X. It gives you kind of a warm fuzzy, though, to watch all the work it's doing. So we go ahead and throw the V in there. You can copy and paste that line just like this. So I want to run the tar command, extract an archive, be verbose about what you're doing, and then the less than just simply means take the contents of this file and shove it into that command. So I go ahead and do that, and the X in the left column means it's extracting the archive, and that's all the files and directories that it's archiving, or excuse me, extracting, not archiving. I'm going to do a clear, get to the top of the screen here. I'll do an ls. So it created that A05 directory. I can cd into A05. I'll do an ls. So if I'm following this, when I'm done, all I should have here is labs. And if I look here, I do have labs, but you see I have a bunch of other stuff in addition to labs. You will note it's not as easy to see in that projector, but directories on mine are blue, regular files are black. You may, or depending on how you're configured, you may or may not have that coloring to help you out. If you don't, there's a useful command called file that will tell you what something is. Oops. All right, so file's a nice command if you need to figure out what something is. So let me clear, let me do an ls. We've got directories lab 1 and lab 2. That doesn't look right to me because based on where we want to end up, we want both of those to be in this labs directory. So if let's see what's in the labs directory. Okay, in the labs directory are a number of directories and a couple weird ones, like this one here is weird. There is no lab 1, so probably what I want to do is I want to move lab 01 into my labs directory. If I do an ls, you no longer see lab 01 here. If I do an ls on the labs directory, you can see that it is now moved down there. All right, so right here, what you're going to want to do is record the steps you take to fix the hierarchy. So I need to in a separate window, this is what you turn in. There's going to be a file called commands.bash that you turn in. So I would actually create a separate terminal window. I would change directories. This is just a command I wrote, so ignore that. But I would get to where my work is, which is right there. Whoops. And the first thing I did is I CD'd into A05. The second thing I did was this one, move lab 1 into labs. Okay, let me do a couple more of these so you can kind of get a feel for the pattern of how you're going to solve this problem. We have so again we have, let me draw a picture. We've got A05. And inside of A05, if I do PWD, that shows me I'm in A05. Oops, that's what I want to highlight. And I do an ls. We have in there lab 2 is a directory. And I have labs in there. So I guess I should be doing something like that instead. Then there's some other files in there. I just want to focus on these two at the moment. If I look in labs, I've got lab 1, lab 2. So I know ultimately this is the hierarchy I want, but I've got this weird confusion between having 2 lab 2s. So let's take a look in each of them. Where am I currently? I'm currently sitting right here's my current directory. So I'll do an ls on lab02, which will show us what's in here. ls lab02. Looks like there's a CPP file. We can actually look at that. There's no need to. I could use that file command, but you'll note. So the come back to that description here. So all of these CPP files are just kind of empty shell source files, and they all look like this, except it says what lab that should be, and that matches the name down here. So if you need a sanity check on these source files, you could always look at them to see what they say. So that's lab2.cpp, and that is sitting right here. Okay, so there's that source file. Now the issue is this file needs to be down in here. So I somehow need to get this moved to be right here. So let's look at the ways we can do that. I'm currently sitting in in AO5. What I need to do is move out of lab2, lab2.cpp. I have to move it into labs, lab2. So that's one way of doing the command. Move lab2, lab2.cpp, and I want to move that into labs, lab2, labs, lab02. Okay, that's one way of doing the command. I just want to show the flexibility. If I move my current directory say I move my current directory right down here, then what's my move command? So let me actually do that. cd lab02. I put a comment here, so I haven't actually done that command. I'm just looking at different ways of doing the exact same thing. If I do an ls, there's lab2.cpp. I'm sitting here, I do an ls. Here's the file in the directory. So I'd say move lab2.cpp. And where do I want to move it? Dot dot. I want to go up here. And then down to labs. And then down to lab02. So that's another way of doing it. Let me actually change my directory to be, what if I change my directory to be way down here? Now first, how do I do cd? I do cd to dot dot labs lab02, cd to dot dot labs lab02. There I am, AO5 labs lab02. So that's where I currently am. Now how do I move it? So I'll give you a hint, starts with that. So how do I, if I'm sitting, sorry, my pen. How do I get from here to this file? What takes me to here? What takes me to here? Dot dot. What takes me to here? And then finally our file, lab02.cpp. Now where do I want to move it to? My current directory, exactly. So dot. So that's three move commands that are exactly the same. The only thing that's different is it depends where in the hierarchy I'm currently sitting. Yeah? Okay. So I wanted to illustrate that flexibility to you. Finally, if you look at reading through these. So I would do one of these, depending on where I was. I'd do a move command. I might have a CD in there if I decided to move around before doing, if I decided to change directory before doing the move command. So one of those move commands would end up in this thing that I'm building. All right, to correct the file hierarchy, any empty files should be removed. So this is actually a useful way of using, let me go up one. If I say file lab04, oh, that's C program text. So you'd actually want to look inside there to see what that should be. That should be something.cpp. You'd look inside it to see, well, let's just do it, vim lab04. This should be named lab04.cpp, so you'd want to rename that file. Let's look at this here. This one looks weird. File labs. That's empty, so you should be doing remove labs. Right? Remove all empty files. And then again, since I'd probably have do some CD stuff and some move stuff. I haven't been typing all this stuff in, so that's what I do. At some point, I would be saying remove labs. Remove duplicate directories. So looking back here, once I've accomplished this and I've moved lab2.cpp into the correct lab2 directory, this is now empty. So remove empty directories. What's the command to remove a directory? rmdir, right? And so you'd remove that directory and you'd go ahead and put that command in here that you did. All right. Does everyone understand what I'm looking for then? Ooh, wait, I gotta have a question here. Let's stop the presses. In cout. This is exciting. It's like a radio show and y'all are callers. Yes, caller. In cout, chevrons are facing, let's see. In cout, chevrons are facing the left and in their face to the right. Why is that? The reason, I think the reason is so that it is visually appealing, meaning that the chevrons always follow the flow of information. So let me quit out of this. So here, information flows from the keyboard into the variable. Here, information flows from the variable to the screen. All right, so that's why the chevrons are going in those directions, to kind of give you some sort of visual cue the direction information is flowing. Just to throw it out, I don't recall if I said it last time, I may have forgotten, but this is one of the single most common mistakes folks make early on. And you're so accustomed to putting end line at the end of some sort of output that you put end line at the end of some sort of input. What that's saying is take information from the keyboard and shove it into ENDL, and that's nonsensical, and it won't compile, and it'll generate a ton of errors, right? So you'd never have something like that. All right. Any other questions? Yes, caller. Oops, sorry. Right, yes, so the CN does have a new line, and actually any keystroke on the keyboard will go to your application when enter is hit, okay? And that enter does include a new line, and it just so happens if you were to analyze the stream of characters that were going into your program, it would include that new line. A lot of times it's not a problem. If I have int a, let me create 3 integers. Now I could do this all in the same line. There's no need to. I could have done cn a, cn b, right? But if you were to look at the stream of characters for doing this, if I was to type in numbers, what I'd be typing in is something like 32. Then I'd be hitting a new line, 45. Then I'd be hitting the enter key, which is providing a new line. Yeah. So what happens? What the reason this works all right is this version of input ignores leading white space, where white space is a space, a tab, or a new line. So in fact, let me actually just very quickly create a program. If I create an integer x, and then I say cin x, and then I say cout, you entered this is for visual appeal that I'm doing here. Let me use endline to be consistent. All right. So, yeah, it turns out that an extra semicolon isn't a problem. That ends up, I shouldn't have done it, but it isn't an error. That's viewed as a null statement. It doesn't do anything. I'll leave it there just for the sake of me fast talking to make it look like I meant to do that. All right, so it asks for an integer, and then it prints out that integer. When I compile this, and then I run it, now what I can do is put a whole bunch of spaces, a couple tabs, I can hit enter a couple times, and then I type 386. It ignores all of that leading white space. So in that example where I had 3 integers and I typed in 32, I hit the enter key, 45, you hit the enter key, then 86. What happens is 23 goes into X. In Y, the new line is white space is ignored, and then the 45 goes into Y. Then Z ignores the new line, and 86 goes into Z. Any other questions? Yeah. Why do you have to type end line sometimes and sometimes you don't? It's all entirely up to you as a programmer what is visually appealing. Okay. If I don't do that, so let's run this again and see what the final output looks like. Okay, that's what that looks like. Now let me change it and get rid of the end line and run it again. Okay, you see the difference is what happened is it printed out this, then it printed out a new line. That's what ENDL is doing, it's printing out a new line. And then the program ended, so I got my prompt here. Here it printed out this information. It did not print out a new line. The program ended, then I got my prompt here. Okay, so there's nothing syntactically forcing me to put an end line at any location. My sole reason for putting the end line is to make it visually appealing to me as a human. Does that make sense? You can put them anywhere. I can say U, ENDL, entered, ENDL. Right, you can do that. You can shove them wherever you want. So this is, you'll note that I added some double quotes. So here's a literal string that's being output, then a new line. Here's another literal string that's being output, and so forth. Now when I compile that, it puts the new lines wherever I tell them to put them. Okay. Any other questions? All right, go ahead and feel free to group up or work on your own as you're comfortable, and have a go at organizing that atrocious hierarchy that I handed you. Yeah.
So, for assignments, I don't think I turned it in. So